Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle. Tara na't simulan ang inyong umaga sa mga magagandang refleksyon tungkol sa ating buhay at pananampalataya. Kasama sina Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Father J. Boy Gonzales at Father Nono Alfonso ng Kapisanan ni Jesus, Father Cali Llamado ng Manila Cathedral at Binibining Risa Sinson Kaupeng ng Light of Jesus Community dito sa Kapit Pandasal sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
May mga bagay na hindi mo hawak, kaya huwag sisihin ang sarili. Ito po si Father Cali mula dito sa Manila Cathedral. Halina po at magkapit pandasal. Maraming mga bagay sa buhay ang nangyayari na hindi ayon sa inaasahan at gusto nating mangyari. Ito'y nakapagdudulot sa atin ng sama ng loob, kalungkutan, at minsan pa nga depression. Nakakadagdag pa dito ang pagsisi natin sa ating mga sarili. Mga kaibigan, mali ang lagi mong sisihin ang sarili mo, lalo na kapag ibinigay mo at ginawa mo naman ang lahat. Sadyang hindi lahat ng bagay ay hawak natin. Hindi ibig sabihin na talo ka ay mali ka na. Kaya, huwag sisihin ang sarili. Huwag lamang tingnan ang hindi natupad, kundi ang mga tamang nagawa. Huwag lamang nakatuon sa mga hindi nangyari, kundi sa mga mabubuting nasimulan. Panginoon naming Diyos, payapa ang aming kalooban dahil alam naming hawak mo ang lahat. Amen.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugo, todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing hiding at tigil.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.
Good morning mga Katipuneros! Welcome to our show here at Radio-Katipunan 87.9 FM. This is the Jesuit Hour and I'm your host, Father Nono Alfonso SJ. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat and welcome to our show. Ngayon pong umagang ito, meron tayong napakagandang show. Very urgent, very relevant. Hinahanap ng maraming mga tao ngayon. Yes, let's talk about how to process the elections, yung mga nalungkot, diba? Yung hindi pa maka-move on and so on and so forth. We have a guest na tutulong po sa atin ano ba yung processing, debriefing, yan po So if you are one of those, heto po. We have our resource person to guide you how to cope with what you have experienced this past few days after the elections. Yes, pero bago po yan, bago po natin pakilala ang atin pong resource person, let's begin with a prayer in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Eternal God, beginning and end, you who sustain all things, who understand all things, who existed before all things, and who are without end, be with us, remain among us, strengthen our intentions, sanctify our souls, and eradicate in us all that is evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, that prayer is from the Ethiopian liturgy. Ganda po, simple lang, short, but very meaningful. Yes, sanctify our souls and eradicate all that is evil in us. Good morning po uli, and now let's introduce our guest this morning. He is a professional counselor, professional psychotherapist, a mental health advocate, and of course, one of our hosts here sa radyo-katipunan, helping us with mental health issues. Yan po, pakilala po natin ang ating kaibigan, walang iba kundi si Charles Patrick Gamo. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Father Nono. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, kumusta ka, Patrick? Nakaboto ka ba nung eleksyon?
Oo naman. Medyo nawawala-wala na nga yun. Actually, pero nandyan pa naman yan. Yung kumusta ka, Pads, parang medyo complex na sagot yung tanong dyan. Pero in general, I'm trying to keep my spirits up given everything that's been happening and all of the stuff that's been happening also on social media and in the news. Mm-hmm. So as much as possible, hindi naman siya toxic positivity, but just trying to focus on the small things that I can take control of every day. Pero kayo, Pads, kamusta?
Ako, mamaya sabihin ko sa'yo kung paano ako naka-recover kaagad. Pero
sure.
Siguro full disclosure na lang sa ating para sa ating mga tagapakinig, Patrick, sino bang binoto mo kasi?
Of course, walang kahiya-hiya sabihin na ang binoto ko ay si Lenny Robredo at Kiko Pangilinan.
Okay. So, kaya ka ngayon nalulungkot. What was your, aside from voting, what was your participation in the campaign ni Lenny?
Right. So from the very beginning, I think this elections talaga yung pinaka pinarticipate ko at saka ng pamilya ko over. So ito yung siguro pang 5 beses ko nang mag-vote ever since yung elections nila former President Noynoy. Mm-hmm. And so this is the one that I think I most actively participated in. So nag-house to house kami ng pamilya ko. Nag-attend kami ng meeting de avance. Nag-attend din yung family ko ng iba pang mga rallies. So kahit sa yung mga Pasay sa Pasig, pumunta din sila. And of course, voting. But that's the right responsibility ng lahat. Mm-hmm. So very more engaged ako these elections than the past few.
And on the eve of the election and on the day of the election itself, you were confident that she was going to win.
I was very, very hopeful that she would. There was parang half-half yan, Pads, kasi may part sa akin na natatakot na baka hindi. although nakita ko naman yung outpouring talaga of support of a lot of the people who volunteered really, and that was the other half that made me hopeful na maybe this time around she would prevail, and the whole advocacy of yung Angat Buhay nga would prevail. So half talaga.
Okay. So I'm sure Patrick, siguro hindi lang ikaw ang feeling heavy these days after the elections.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people have approached you, and organizations as well, asking for your help to debrief themselves, kumbaga para matulungan silang iproseso yung mga nangyari, yung kanilang mga feelings and emotions, heavy emotions. I'm sure marami na lumapit sa iyo, pati na itong Radyo Katipunan.
Syempre, oo. Actually, sa Pads, nung Tuesday, nung pagkagising ko, bago kasi ako matulog the night before, nung night of the elections, nakikita ko na yung results. So, medyo mabigat yung pakiramdam ko na nung patulog na ako. Tapos, medyo mabigat pa rin yung pakiramdam ko nung pagkagising ko. So, iniisip ko na sana kung siguro wag na muna ako magtrabaho this week para i-nurse yung mga feelings ko. But then I realized, and this is something I'll share also about throughout today's episode, about how I coped with it. But eventually I chose to just kind of keep to my appointments, and also accept any and all appointments or requests that people might have in terms of responding to or how to manage and deal with after effects of the elections. So yeah, I think over the past week, I've done, excluding this, I've done about 3 debriefing sessions.
Okay.
On top of the debriefing that I had to do with all of my patients then. So
before we talk about what debriefing is, yung mga organizations or yung mga tao na tinulungan mo in your debriefing, what emotions did they report to you? Anong mga kumbaga bag of emotions that they shared with you?
Yeah, I think yung top 5, and so i-comment nyo na lang sa chat box or sa comment section kung if you guys also share these feelings. Pero yung top 5 siguro doon, number 1 was hopelessness and despair. Number 2 was sadness. Number 3 was frustration. Number 4 was anxiety. And number 5 was fear.
Fear.
So those 5. So, sorry, ulit. Rundown is hopelessness and sadness.
Frustration.
Hopelessness, sadness, frustration, fear, anxiety.
And fear.
Yeah.
What about, sa akin kasi ang mga lumalapit, galit, anger. What about anger?
Yeah, yun. So first part of the frustration was the anger.
Anger, okay. Okay. So let me ask you now, what is debriefing? What is debriefing, or yung tinatawag nilang processing of these emotions? How would you define that as a psychotherapist?
Yeah. So the best way I can explain debriefing, I guess, it's time that anybody spends after a stressful event or a crisis event to unpack or to unburden or to really just go through everything that happened to them. The briefing is a very technical term and also has a very technical definition, which I don't want to bore our listeners with. But basically, it's that. It's unpacking and really laying down all of their internal experiences, both like literally what has happened and also what showed up for them because of what happened.
Usually, sa mga di ba, sa mga trauma, sa mga tragedy, aksidente, di ba? Like for example, we had that when Yolanda hit the Philippines. After Yolanda, ang daming mga psychologists na pumunta doon sa affected areas and offered counseling. Debriefing yung sinasabi nila.
Stress debriefing is the term. Yeah.
Pero yung phenomenal sa akin, Patrick, and you can comment on this. Understandable yung debriefing sa tragedy, sa trauma.
Sa mga Yolanda.
Yung mga ganun, Pero this one, it was an election, di ba?
Yeah.
It was
and we've
politics.
had elections before. That's right.
Yes. So why is this different? Why is this traumatic, for many? That's phenomenal sa akin.
So na unpack ko ito over the course of the past few months in myself and some of my close friends, but also recently in our last episode of Mind Ed,
Mhm.
2 Thursdays ago. So
Mhm.
the Thursday before the elections, where we interviewed a first-time voter,
Mhm.
a person from an alternative vocation, and then a small business owner. And then also nung Monday of the elections when we were doing the special coverage, hindi just coverage, basta the election special that we did
Mhm.
on the day of the elections. And the overarching theme, I think, Pads, and I don't know if you agree with this, pero this these elections are unlike all of the elections
Yeah.
prior,
Yeah.
except maybe nung snap elections nung 1986.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, it's because there was a lot more at stake here than just kung ano yung next economic or foreign policy na susundan.
Mhm.
What we found out, or what I've realized from all of the people I've spoken about, is for them, they've attached the notion of, or the what's at stake here is not just yun nga, not just the economic policy, but what it means to be a Filipino talaga.
Mhm.
Because this is no longer about, or this wasn't about who had the better 6-year plan for industrialization. This was about values. And it was a conflict of what kind of Filipino we were going to be after these elections.
Mhm.
They based their vote not just, or they based their boast sorry, they based their vote on whether the kind of Filipino we were going to be is the kind of Filipino who stands up for truth, who shows up, who persists in the face of adversity, who loves radically, is compassionate, is inclusive, or if we were going to be the type of Filipino that lets fake news run rampant, allows cheating, allows dirty politics or traditional politicking, and that kind of stuff. And for a lot of people, that's how much these elections that are weighed in for them. Pero actually, that makes me curious now, Pads. For you ba? I mean, gaano katanda na, sorry, I don't know if this ages you, but gaano katanda na po kayo nung People Power 1?
People Power 1, I was I was high school, third year high school.
Mm-mm.
Yung
So, yeah.
yung grade 6 ako nung pinatay si Ninoy Aquino. Okay.
Oh. So,
So,
does it, in a way, does it kind of feel the same for you na these elections kind of weigh more than elections past?
yes. Yes. Yung ang binabalikan ko lagi yung statement ng mga obispo. Hindi masyadong hindi masyadong nagkaroon ng spotlight yun which
Yeah.
was released at the anniversary of the EDSA this year, the
Yeah.
EDSA People
In Feb.
Power Revolution. Nirelease ng mga obispo and they just zeroed in on truth. 'Di ba na in this election the one that is being kumbaga tried is truth. Kasi nga how can you conduct elections, 'di ba? Ang presumption natin sa elections and democracy, 'di ba?
Yeah.
Everything is based on truth, 'di ba? Sabi ko nga, kung bibili ka nga ng 'di ba? Pupunta ka sa supermarket, bibili ka ng 'di ba, ng pagkain, etc., 'di ba? Gusto mo, 'di ba, makatotohanan, 'di ba?
Oo.
O 'di ba, election pa. So sa akin people fail to appreciate the statement of the bishops,
The bishops,
but it was kumbaga talagang on point sila na there was so much misinformation or disinformation, fake news, etc., etc. So 'di ba, like for example, kasama sa eleksyon yung pagtatanong, 'di ba? Ito bang kandidatong ito magaling sa ganyan. Hindi humaharap sa debate.
Exactly.
Paano 'yun? How can you evaluate?
Exactly.
'Di ba? So truth talaga yung yung kumbaga ang was put on trial in this election.
That's right.
And that's why it's very critical. Kasi 'di ba yung mga elections naman na nagdaan, alam naman natin na medyo yung mga kandidato merong mga dagdag bawas, 'di ba?
Right.
Alam naman natin 'yan pero humaharap sila at pwede silang tanungin, 'di ba? Sinabi mo to, totoo ba to? Pero kung hindi talaga humaharap, 'di ba? Tapos yung ang pinapagana lang yung alam naman natin na makinarya na
Yeah.
even employed Russia British firm, 'di ba? Yung Cambridge
Yeah.
Analytica to
Yeah.
be nakakatakot eh. Nakakatakot. So so ibang-iba talaga tong election na ito.
Exactly. So
Mm.
yun din eh, that was part of what was at stake. Na parang what truth are we really holding to and really embracing? Is it the truth that is the actual truth that has been the recorded truth, or what is being peddled around on Facebook and wag natin sabihin. So on social media in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
Oo.
Ang
So,
mangyari nga ngayon, limbawa, with this government, since they could just, during the campaign, they could just poo-poo COMELEC, the 14 million Filipinos na, di ba, humihingi ng, ng debate, etc., etc.
yeah,
Di ba, now that they're in power, all the more they can do that. Di ba?
exactly.
Di ba, what is your hold on them, di ba?
Yeah.
Now that they're in power, truth is, di ba, will suffer furthermore, di ba?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's how critical it is. Kaya nga yung simbahan, which is non-partisan lagi, many priests felt na because it's our business eh. Sorry for the for the term. It's
Yeah.
our business. Truth is our business, 'di ba? Kung iyan ay challenge, 'di ba? Ano nang mangyayari sa atin, ano?
Yeah.
Truth is the foundation of everything,
Yeah.
'di ba? So anyway, balik tayo dun sa debriefing. Ikaw mukhang pinoproseso mo ako
Oo
Iho.
naman. Part yun.
Parang anyway, so you mentioned na yun nga no, parang this is very critical. That's why
Yeah.
this election for many was very critical for many reasons. Ako nga sabi ko because of the truth issue
Yeah.
around these elections. So kaya sila when the candidate they supported lost, diba? They feel all of these emotions,
Yeah.
heavy
Yeah.
emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ang tanong ko meron bang pagkakaiba-iba yung dinadaanan ng mga tao? Like halimbawa, may nagsasabi sa akin na yung mga kabataan daw na, 'di ba, naging active in the Lenny campaign. They are may mga nagsasabi sa akin mga magulang hanggang ngayon umiiyak daw yung mga anak nila, ayaw na mag-aral, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So meron bang ganun? Merong kumbaga age sensitive din ba itong mga ganitong emotions?
Yeah, I think for the most part, so I did debriefing with some church youth, and generally ganun nga yung experience nila. And some have experienced more than just the crying, but also a sense of isolation. And I think so it's more than it is age dependent, it's circumstance dependent. So I think for a lot of the first time, yung circumstances of those who are first time voters or first time to have gotten involved in campaigning or in politicking to this scale.
Mhm.
But generally the common theme is that this is a grief reaction or a grief response. And so common amongst grief, or common in the grief response, is this overwhelming feeling of loss.
Mhm.
And I think that's what all of us feel. Yung common 5 stages of grief are denial and anger and depression and then bargaining bago dumating sa acceptance. So actually ngayon nga 7 na daw yung steps pero I'll stick to the 5 kasi yun yung mas common or yung pinaka-common na alam ng mga tao. So it's still part of it. So the people who have approached you who are angry, that's also part of the grief process. That the young people who are crying now, that's also part of the grief process. Because maybe that's the common experience of everybody. We all feel like we've lost something great. Or we lost something incredibly necessary for the sustenance or the propagation or the viability of our future. Nawalan tayo. Yun yung nangyari sa atin lahat. And super valid. I think yun yung narrative I think that came out the day after the results came out, or the partial results, unofficial results came out, na parang sinayang natin si Lenny.
Mhm. Mhm.
Kasi diba, yun din yung narrative over the course of the campaign. There is only one Lenny Robredo. She does not come from a political dynasty. She does not come from a family of politicians.
Yeah.
And she's one of a kind. And it feels like we wasted our chance to have leadership that has the Lenny Robredo. Not even a Robredo period kasi syempre, diba, nandun din si Jesse, God rest his soul. But an actual Lenny Robredo presidency.
And on that point, kababayan ko si Lenny, di ba? And actually, ang family friend namin is si Jesse Robredo, close friend ng mother ko.
Yeah.
Pero I've been to their place in Naga City, talagang duplex lang. Ibig ko sabihin, they really live very simply, and both the husband and the wife, si Jessie at si Lenny, talagang distinguished themselves in public service.
Yeah.
Talagang so ako personally, 'di ba, may personal knowledge ako, kaya mas masakit na 'di ba, pag sinisiraan siya, ganyan daw, ganyan. Like, these are all fake news. Pero how do you defend yourself, ano? How do you defend her? 'Di ba? Tapos ang mananalo yung kabaligtaran, 'di ba? So anyway, talagang nasayang talaga yung chance na 'yon. So Patrick, so how does one, ikaw halimbawa as the counselor, how did you lead the group to yun nga, in this debriefing? How's the process, kumbaga?
Sige. So I think what I want to emphasize here, and so I guess this episode's a little different because I'm not interacting with a group of people. I'm just interacting with you, Pads. So I'll try to synthesize all of the key points that I had in both a message that I sent to the radyo-katipunan group.
Ang ganda nun.
Salamat. And to on my social media page, and also through the debriefing. Do I go through the message first, or do I, let's say, the 3 points na lang muna. So the first point ultimately, I said kasi in my message na parang okay lang na maging malungkot kasi nalungkot tayo dahil may pake tayo, nagmahal tayo, at gusto lang natin ng mas magandang kinabukasan para sa sarili natin, sa mga pamilya natin, at para sa isa't isa, at para sa bansa natin. So, damdamin natin yon kasi importante at valid yon. And so the first point that I want to emphasize for today is when dealing with grief or any stressful emotion, the first important point, or the first most important thing that you can do really is to label it, acknowledge and make space for it, and share it with other people. Share it with people who you trust or who can support you. A metaphor that I used in one of my debriefing sessions is emotions, especially painful and uncomfortable emotions or sensations, are like, the better metaphor, I explain ko yung pangalawang metaphor, but the better metaphor, they're like mushrooms kasi. When you keep them in the dark, they tend to grow. And the longer you keep them in the dark, the bigger they get. So, parang shedding light on the mushrooms of your emotions means to first acknowledge it yourself and to be able to name it, like actually literally explicitly name it. Sorry, go Pat.
Pero Patrick, masarap yung mushroom paborito ko.
Sige. Minsan, pero may mga dangers kasi at poisonous na mushrooms, Pads. Totoo naman.
Okay. So anyway, so your point is they mushroom, they expand, they worsen, di ba?
They fester.
Okay.
So shedding light on your emotions means, number one, taking time first to explore yourself and to acknowledge na, these are things that are happening inside of me, or these are things that I'm actually feeling. And they are real. So part of shedding light on them is also, apart from naming it, is also not invalidating yourself. Na parang not denying yourself the experience of actually feeling your feelings. And then shedding light on them is also sharing them with other people. Now, it's helpful because, I'll share a little bit of neuroscientific trivia here. The part of the brain kasi that processes emotions is the midbrain or the limbic system,
Mhm.
which is this a separate part from the part of your brain that processes um, rational thought. Now, when you talk about your feelings or when you acknowledge your feelings and then you talk about them, what it does in a way is it takes that information from the midbrain or the limbic system and brings it to your prefrontal cortex. And in a way, by yourself, by talking about your emotions, you're making sense of them. And in a way, also solves the emotion. Not that emotions are problems. They're not naman talaga. But it helps you make sense of what it is that you're feeling by sharing it with other people. So, yun.
Does it also have to do with, di ba yung mga, anong tawag dyan, yung unconscious na when you deny your emotions daw, you drive them into your unconscious and so you have no control. Di ba?
Yeah.
Minsan, like yung ano, di ba, yung ang classic example now is yung kay Will Smith, di ba? And Chris Rock, di ba?
Mm-mm.
Na ang sabi nila, yung pong doon po sa hindi mahilig sa Hollywood, 'di ba? During the Oscars night, ano, that's the kumbaga biggest day ano in Hollywood awards night. Biglang sinampal ni Will Smith si Chris Rock
Chris Rock.
over a joke
Remark.
about Will Smith's wife, ano. But anyway, ang explanation ng mga tao, for the longest time ito raw pong si Will Smith ay aping-ape ng asawa. So, namumuo yung galit niya, no? Kasi po, nagkaroon kasi sila ng, di ba yung open relationship, di
Like a
ba?
marital problem. Yeah.
So anyway, so namumuo yung galit niya at kumbaga, si ano ang napagbunto na niya ng galit niya, si Chris Rock. May ganun, ano? Di ba? May, if you deny your emotions, your feelings, you will have no control of them at some point.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things also with in relation to the first point of, shedding light or labeling and making space for your emotions is we have to understand, and this is also like deriving from the first part of my message about it's okay to be sad is because the whatever feeling that it is that you're feeling, may pinanggagalingan siya na hindi masama. We have a saying in acceptance and commitment therapy. The saying is that whenever there's a gap between what you want or what you need and what you currently have or where you are, that gap is filled in by a feeling. And so in a way, or in a manner of speaking, our emotions are indicators or signposts that tell us about what it is that we care about. So tulad ng sinabi ko, kaya tayo malungkot ay dahil may pake tayo at nagmahal tayo. So in fact, what I'm saying essentially is we're grieving because we loved. And so there's this nice saying from one of my favorite shows. What is grief if not love persevering? Yes. So we're grieving because we loved, and love is never a bad thing unless you're loving a bad thing. That's so iba na yun. Pero essentially,
but in your practice, Patrick, ang mga Pilipino, they're not comfortable with negative emotions, right?
Yeah.
They immediately deny. Ay, hindi ako galit. Ganun ka agad
okay
yan,
lang
diba?
ako, diba? Ganun usually.
Diba? How do you explain that? Why are we like that? Or iba bang mga lahi ganyan din?
Sa totoo lang, pati mga Australians, Americans, Europeans, ganyan din.
Ganon din.
And it's more a societal or cultural thing rather than it is like an intrinsic thing. But actually, also part of it is instinctive. Parang in the same way that we don't like feeling physical pain. Kung kunwari, na may nahawakan kang sobrang mainit na nakakapaso, the first instinct is to recoil. Kasi masakit. Ganyan din yung instinct natin with painful internal experiences then. It's unpleasant and it's uncomfortable, and that's fine. And also kasi society has perpetuated this feel good culture. That's why they sell all of these kinds of products just to make you feel good. Or the way people have branded things is about happiness or feeling good. blank soda, open happiness.
Yeah.
Diba? Or ano ba? More energy, mas happy, and so on and so forth. So we've really kind of pushed this this culture where we need to be focusing on only the things that feel good. But
Yeah.
what I teach in my therapy is that not everything that feels good is good, and not everything that feels bad is bad.
Wow,
And
ang
so,
ganda nun. Quotable quote yan ah.
sige, ano natin yan? I-highlight natin yan. Pero, di ba, parang, and that's not something kasi that's taught in schools,
Yeah.
which hopefully sometime in the future down the line it changes. But it's not the same kasi with physical pain. Emotional pain comes from a place of love and care. And that's something I think people it would be important for people to
It's
acknowledge.
societal, it's also cultural, ano, like, naalala ko sa ating mga lalaki, ano, yung, wag iiyak, lalaki ka.
Oh,
Mga ganon,
boys
di
don't
ba?
cry, di ba?
Yes,
Oo.
sa formation natin sa pamilya, laging gano'n. Huwag kang iiyak
Yeah.
ha, huwag kang emotional, lalaki ka eh.
Ah,
'Di ba? Matatag ka. Totoy ba to, 'di ba?
oo.
'Di ba?
Exactly.
So, okay, so the first step, sabi mo nga is to shed light on your emotions.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
The second step, that's the second part of my message. Sabi ko, and while I carry my own, I memorize ko na at this point, hindi nga na siya nakabukas eh. While I carry my own frustration and sadness and grief, I remember that being a voter or Filipino citizen is a really, really important part of who I am, but it's only part of who I am. At the same time, the other parts of me are that I'm a husband, I am a dad, I am a son, I am a psychotherapist, radyo-katipunan host, and so on and so forth. And those are things that I also care about. Not equally, not more, not less, but I care about them. And the sad truth of it is, the outcome of the elections, I have no control over. Although I did my part and I did as much as I could talaga during the election campaign. Like I said, I went house to house, I talked to people, I went to rallies, I voted. Pero yung totoo doon is that was the extent of my control. I can't change the vote count of the other candidate. I can't change the vote count for Lenny. I can't control that. And as the saying goes, the more you try to change what is out of your control, the more frustrated or hopeless you feel. And so that's the second step, or the second thing that I want people to bear in mind is you find a lot more peace and fulfillment and meaning and purpose when you focus on what is within your control in the here and now. Sige, I'll kind of stick with that for a bit before I get to my next point. But yeah.
Can you say my interpretation of what you're saying is parang perspective, 'di ba? Parang sinasabi mo kasi na hindi naman kasi lahat kontrolado mo, ano. So
yeah.
At may iba kontrolado mo. So just focus on kung ano yung kontrolado mo, 'di ba?
Yeah.
Like yung pagkatalo ni Lenny 31 million Filipinos voted against her.
Yeah.
Diba? So that's out of your control, diba? You already gave your contribution to the campaign, etc. So have some perspective, in other words.
Yeah. The part of it is that, but also part of it is I want people to bear in mind that this is not a message to say na parang just move on, tapos na yon. Hindi yon. What I'm saying is really take stock of what's within your control. As in, if you have something that is within your control that you can either use or, for lack of a better word, manipulate to make the situation better. So sabihin natin kung aktivista ka or mobilizer ka or lawyer ka or taga-COMELEC ka. If there's something within your control that you can actually do to improve or change the situation, please, by all means. But for me, for now, it's the parang eating a slice of humble pie and acknowledging na parang right now, wala pa ako magagawa about it. I mean, kung nagkaroon ng ebidensya ng foul play na talagang lantaran na pwede natin gamitin as I guess evidence for a protest or a rally, then sure, I will
Yeah.
join that. But hanggang sa ngayon na wala pa akong opportunity to do that. There are other things that matter in my life. And this ties up with my third point, but I'll explain that later. For now, na wala pa akong kayang or kailangan gawin about those things. Unahin ko yung ibang may kailangan sa akin.
Can I make an analogy?
Sure, please.
Sa amin yung turo sa amin sa feedback giving, 'di ba? When you give a feedback on someone, 'di ba? Feedback on the things that he can change.
Exactly.
'Di ba? Like halimbawa, kung magbibigay kasi ng feedback na you're very short. He cannot do anything about that, 'di ba? Or halimbawa, hindi ko gusto ang karakas ng mukha mo. 'Di ba? Wala naman siya magagawa sa mukha niya, 'di ba?
Exactly.
Pero yung halimbawa, yung nung sinabi mo ito, nasaktan ako, 'di ba? So
Yeah.
that is within his control, yung mga sinasabi niya, 'di ba?
Exactly. Yeah.
So parang ganoon, 'di ba? Kumbaga, it's futile to, 'di ba, to focus on things that are beyond you, 'di ba? Beyond your power and control, ano?
Yeah.
So it's more productive or constructive to focus on things that you can, 'di ba, you can still change or have an effect on.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
so
moving
again,
forward, moving forward, Patrick, yun yung mahalaga, no? Ano magagawa mo? Hindi yung focus on, kasi minsan, 'di ba, minsan yung anxiety is 'di ba, you're stressing out on things na hindi pa naman nga nangyayari, 'di ba? Ini-imagine mo lang, 'di ba? So just focus on what you can do. Si Father Francis Alvarez nung Sunday, ang homily niya dun sa Frozen 2, yung just do in the darkness, 'di ba? Just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
Yung kanta raw doon ng bida, no? Just do the breathe and do the next right thing, 'di ba?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, that's a very, very nice song to remember in this time of sadness. I'll bear that in mind. Gagamitin ka ng pads. Salamat.
Okay. So what's the third step? Are we done with the second step?
Yeah. So the third step, I think that integrates really. So all of these things go hand in hand, by the way. So sabi ni Pads, diba, na a lot of the time when you're anxious, you're focusing a lot on things that haven't happened yet. And that's true. And it's still important to acknowledge that anxiety, that there is anxiety there, because it shows you that there's an outcome that you don't want. But don't hold on to the anxiety of what might happen next. Focus on what is within your control that you can change right now to avert that outcome. And so this is now in relation to the next thing, which is the third thing, which is about assessing workability. So that's a term for in acceptance and commitment therapy, both assessing workability and having clarity on what your values are. So again, third point is assess what works best for you while being mindful of what you value. And what I mean by this practically is, sige, story na lang nung the day after the elections, when I woke up, I had half a mind to just call off work for the entire day and a quarter of a mind to call off work for the rest of the week. And kasi dinadamdam ko talaga siya because my family was a little was directly affected also by martial law. Wala naman kaming relative na actually meron. Pero in terms of like my mom and her family, there was a lot of fear because my lolo, before he died, he worked in print media. He operated a printing imprenta, and they were threatened that if they wouldn't print the prop materials that bad things were
Yeah.
gonna happen and whatever.
Yeah.
So directly affected kami.
Yeah.
And so I had all of those fears na parang, shucks, ito, ganito na naman, what's going to happen to us, what's going to happen to my family, and so on and so forth. But the fun thing is when so si Cassie kasi, so she's 20 months by, oh my God, this week. She sleeps with us on the bed, and every morning siya yung unang gumigising sa amin tatlo. So what she does is she sits up on the bed habang nakahiga pa kami, and she just sits and waits for a bit, and she waits for either of us to para pansinin siya. And it just so happened ako yung una nakapansin sa kanya. And usually kasi what she does when she notices somebody make eye contact with her in the morning, what she does is she does this small wave. Yung sobrang cute lang talaga. And then she smiles, and then she says, "Dada." And then smiles a much bigger smile. And then usually at that point, I would get her and I would hug her, and then, and moving forward. But again, like I said, that morning I was feeling extra heavy. So when I saw her and she said, "Dada," she called me. I had this freeze frame moment, this split second freeze frame moment na parang, what kind of dad do I want to be today? And that spilled over into many things. I thought na parang, so do I want to be the kind of dad that is going to disconnect from her or disengage from her, tell her, "Sorry, Cassie, I can't play with you today. I'm too sad. And I can't take care of you. So I'm just going to stay in bed." And then that spilled over into, okay, so if I call off work today, am I going to be the kind of therapist or clinician that I want to be, who's not there for the people who need the help? Not me, but the help. What kind of husband do I want to be today? Am I going to be the kind of husband who alienates my wife's sadness and doesn't support her or doesn't share with her and close off from her? And then, all of those thoughts kind of happened in that split second. And I said, no, I don't want to be that today. And so maybe today I can just carry my grief and my frustration and my sadness whilst still being the kind of dad, husband, clinician that I aspire to be, that I idealize myself to be. And that's what I did. So I hugged my daughter, I changed her diaper, I made my wife breakfast, and then I proceeded to hear out the grief also of the other people who were grieving for that day and for the rest of the week. And so that's what I mean about what works. You don't ask yourself whether can I be happy or not. You ask yourself, what am I going to do that works towards or helps me become or be aligned to the kind of person that I want to be? So yun yung parang mixture of workability and values. It's not that I wasn't sad. I wasn't necessarily happy. In fact, I cried with some of the clients that I saw that day. But I was there because that's the kind of clinician I want to be. I want to be the kind of clinician who is present and attuned. So, yun, that kind of integrates all of those things because being a clinician, being a dad, being a husband, that's all within my control.
Yeah.
And while I pursued those things, I also made space for what I was feeling because those feelings are also just a part of me. They don't define my entire being. And that's the same thing for all of us, I think. Sorry, ang dami ko na sinabi pa.
Yeah, okay siya. Okay siya. Yung this looms large right now, this electoral loss, this defeat, this failure, and let's call it the bad names, So this looms large, but if we are to apply yung sinasabi mo about perspective, about workability, di ba?
Yeah.
Now, this is just one dimension of our lives, although it really affects us.
It's very important. And
it's important.
It's large.
But, di ba, and yet, there are other things in your life that you have to attend to as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hindi ko naman sinasabi na because you attend to the other parts of who you are, that you forget that you are a Filipino and that you are, that's still part of it. And you still need to attend to that. But it's not the only thing that's there. And tulad din ng sinabi ng kandidato natin, hindi pa naman tapos.
Mhm.
And walang nasayang. So siguro ito yung like bonus point natin today is wala naman talagang nasayang. It's just that we might have started the movement or the campaign much later than the other side started their
Yeah.
machinations in their campaign.
Yeah.
But what we have is a really, really beautiful thing. What our candidate has inspired in us is really
Yeah.
beautiful. The volunteerism, the charity, the compassion, the perseverance, really. I mean, there are stuff for us to learn too, you know. We weren't perfect. There were
Mhm.
things that we could have done better. How personal learning ko from this campaign is maybe we focused a little bit too much on trying to educate the D's and the E's about what to look for in a candidate, but we never really asked them what they needed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so maybe that's what the spirit of the
Mhm.
Angat Buhay NGO is now for, is to um, work towards the next 6 years so that in the next presidential elections there are no more votes that need to be bought because everybody has what they need, and
Mhm.
therefore they can now focus on voting for principle. So
Amen.
marami tayong matututunan, di ba?
So, you've given this process three step process ano sa ilang mga kliyente mo at organizations. How did that go with these organizations?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are still very sad. And sabi ko
Yeah.
naman sana, that my focus is not to make you less sad. My
Mhm.
focus is to get you to relate to the sadness or to have regard for the sadness a little differently.
Mhm.
In a way that it makes it easier for you to carry that sadness whilst still moving towards what you think or what you feel is a meaningful life for you, because you can still have a meaningful life. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's not over.
I'm curious, ano, as a psychotherapist, why didn't you just use yung kay Elizabeth Kubler-Ross na 5 stages or sabi mo ngayon 7 stages na? It's more, di ba? It's more, it's popular. It's parang, uh, yes, it's familiar.
uh
It's easy.
yeah, kasi feeling ko, well, that might be the focus of the work of a lot of other therapists,
Mm-mm.
but for me it's not. It's really about trying to move forward, not neglecting or forgetting, but to move forward meaningfully from anything that happens to us. And not that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work isn't meaningful, but it's very, what's the word for it? Parang it's very rudimentary, or it's very
Yeah.
basic. And I want people to be able to go deeper into it themselves than rather than just to say, yeah, this is part of the grief process, so okay lang.
Mhm.
Kasi you don't necessarily find your own personal meaning from that. It doesn't
Yeah.
really invite you to explore anything.
Ang tanong ko, Patrick,
Mm.
so people are going through a lot emotionally these days,
Yeah.
and it helps to go through these debriefing processes, ano. But
Mm-mm.
For how long can you allow yourself to feel these emotions? Kasi may trabaho, di
Right.
ba?
Right.
So, kasi may tanong ngayon, move on. Is it move on? Is it move forward? Di ba?
Yeah.
So, what's your advice?
What one of the things I love most about acceptance and commitment therapy is it's a very pragmatic approach to living and life. And so the answer to that is, for as long as it still works for you. So
Mhm.
as long as you feel like you still are able to lead a functional life,
Mhm.
or as long as within your control pa yung mga, so kunwari, may leaves ka pa naman and you feel like you're
Mhm.
not going to be using it for anything else, then sure, go ahead. Pero basically, yun yung what I'm always trying to maintain with the people I work with, is for as long as it is functional. As long as you get some use out of it, not just for it to make you feel better, but as long as it's helping you to move towards that vision of your life that is meaningful and rich and fulfilling.
May mga tumatawag sa akin din na nagsasabi na, what can we do, ano? So let's start planning.
Yeah.
Action is also helpful, right?
Yeah.
When you cope with tragedies,
Yeah.
etc., diba? Without denying your emotions,
Yeah.
some of us would try to be constructive or productive, diba?
Yeah.
That helps them more than
Yeah.
just staying in the
Yeah.
emotions.
Yeah. So definitely I think people di naman sa shouldn't wallow. Well, okay, yes, you shouldn't wallow in your emotions. You should label and acknowledge and make space for it. But don't forget also, like I said, na there are other things in your life that also need your attention
Mhm.
and your response, whether it's your work or the people you love or the people who love you or all of the different responsibilities that you have. So um, I think that's the thing about grief. Eh. Um, and so this is a callback, I think, to my lolo, the one I talked about
Mhm.
who died. He died not because of martial law, naman. He died of cancer back in 2005. And there are certain points now when I remember him or when I think about him, it's hard for me now to kind of remember exactly what it is that he looks like or what he sounds like. But I will never forget um, the most important lesson that he taught me in my life. And he's mentioned or he's told me this so many different times over the course of him being alive and me experiencing him alive. And his lesson to me was um, whatever is worth doing well. Now
Mhm.
that's not particularly relevant to what we've been talking about. What why it's important or why I'm mentioning it is because that's how I've learned to move on from my grief over his death. It's not by forgetting my sadness that he's gone, but more living what he's instilled in me up
Mhm.
to this very day. And I think that's my invitation for everybody also is not to yes, feel free to mourn the loss, but to not forget all of the lessons that you've learned
Yeah. Yeah.
from being part of this campaign and using all of those things that you've learned to do better
Yeah.
or to live better. Not for just yourself, but for the people around you. And when the time comes for us to rise up again and to fight for what we believe in, then we have that with us.
Yeah. Actually, yes, there's a saying like that, ano, that the past is never wasted for as long as you learn from it, diba?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, we should learn from this. Sa akin, ang isang learning talaga is, and bishops are saying this, ano,
Mm-mm.
na kulang yung ano, no, if you're going to be active during the election year lang, diba?
Yeah.
So, it has to be the work for justice, for the spread of truth,
Yeah.
'di ba? Fighting oppression, etc. is a
Yeah.
daily thing, ano,
Yeah.
for us. It's not during election lang. So
Yeah.
kinulang talaga tayo ng oras din, ano.
Yeah.
Uh, so dapat may ginagawa na. Anyway, ako namamangha talaga ako, no. Thank you for sharing us the process that you're using, ano, for many organizations going through heavy emotions these days. Namamangha ako, sa akin phenomenal yung ano, no, yung tragedy na ito, yung
Yeah.
apolitical, 'di ba? Marami naman dati apolitical eh.
Yeah.
Pero ngayon, 'di ba, apektado
Yeah.
ng politika. Merong ano, no, merong branch ng psychology yung well, social psychology, no, na
Yeah.
parang can you tell us more about that, na yung 'di ba, yung hindi lang pala the individual
Yeah.
ang ano, no, ang concern ng psychology, but
Yeah.
societal as well.
Yeah. I think sige, well, with regards to that, what is social is also individual, and what is
Mhm.
individual is also social. So parang, and what I mean by that is why psychology is interested in the phenomena of what is social is because it also
Mhm.
has or gives us insight into the individual and vice versa. And it's all about learning to um, assess or broaden and deepen our understanding of culture and the human experience, I think. So, kaya din siya, you're right, it's a very, very interesting thing kasi parang bakit nga ngayon sobrang bigat. But then, that's because yun nga, people have taken this personally. And that's why societally, it's become such a huge thing now.
Okay. I know you've shared with us yung process, but what would be your advice? Halimbawa, may lumapit sa yung kabataan. Kasi yung mga kabatcho sa college, ang worry na talaga ay yung mga kabataan, yung mga anak nila na talagang depressed daw. So, what would be your advice to first the parents, and of course, if you can talk to the children, what would you say?
Yeah. So the most important thing apart from labeling and making space or shedding light on the emotions, apart from focusing on what's in your control and apart from really being in touch with what you care about and doing something about it, is for the parents, it's to really be there for your kids. To be present with them and to really hear them out, and also not to invalidate them. This is how it's. I don't know if you still remember your first, your first experience of loss in your family. Or like sa akin, I remember my first experience of loss is my mom's lola. And I took it really hard because I was really close to her, but I was also at the same time, I was only 11 or 10 years old, I think, at this point. And I remember just kind of crying out in the middle of mass. And my mom didn't, she didn't like mock me or scoff at me for crying out of all of a sudden. She just sat there with me and asked me what's going on for me. And she gave me the time and the space to talk about it. And for the parents, that's what you guys need to do also. Because again, this is a grief experience. And for a lot of us, especially first time or people who've never experienced grief, it's very overwhelming and it's very new. And we need to take the time really to really unpack that. And similarly, that's also my advice, if ever, for young people who don't know how to kind of figure this out, is to really take the time to sit down and connect with somebody that you can share this with. So if ever, yun yung pinaka-important is the shedding light, giving the space and the time.
What about for those who really invested so much of their resources, time, and energy? Meron akong mga nakausap na gano'n na talagang galit na galit. Sabi na ayaw na raw nila from now on tumulong. Diba? So talagang kung sakali man pipiliin na lang yung tutulungan, yung na lang, kakampings na lang daw. So
I can't say that I blame them though, because a lot of my mom included, yun na sabihin ko magkano. Pero she also found herself investing a lot into this. And she really took it hard. And so again, also making space for the anger, understanding that it was because of something that you cared about, but also asking yourself na lang din, if you lead that kind of life, if you make those kinds of decisions, being exclusive about who you help or whatever, does that help you live the kind of life that you want, or does that help you be the kind of person that you want to be? And if it is, then okay. If it's not though, then you need to reassess. So it all falls back to that question ulit na parang it's really about knowing what you really, really, truly care about, and then doing everything that is necessary to pursue that.
Yeah. And in the long run, it's counterproductive kasi yun yung dahilan kung bakit ganito tayo ngayon, di ba?
Exactly.
A large portion of our population feel ignored, di ba? So, yung boto nila, panggalit lang, or, di ba? So, anyway, thank you so much, Patrick. Last, ano na lang siguro, word na lang. Ikaw mismo, where do you draw hope and inspiration these days?
I draw hope and inspiration both. So from the people closest to me first is of course from my daughter and my wife, who, you know, my daughter sobrang parang ignorance sa kanya ko nakikita yung ignorance is bliss. Although I do not wish that I were ignorant, but I really see in her na parang there's hope in the future. And my hope is in her. Not that she will save me or anything, but my hope is in that I will do whatever it is within my power to give her a better future than the present that I have.
Correct.
And then also for in my wife, then si Chai na you know, I see how strong she is, and I see how prayerful she is, and I draw inspiration from that. But ultimately, the one of the biggest sources of inspiration I have is Lenny herself talaga.
Yeah.
To see her carry on, to see na parang hindi siya, I don't know what happens in behind closed doors between her and her daughters. But for her to decide na, you know what? Yes, I'm not the president, or I might not be the president now, but I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really instilled a lot of hope in me na parang the Angat Buhay like program now is not just a program, it's an NGO that people can participate in, and it gives everybody an avenue or a way to really continue that spirit of what you know, her and all of the people who were with her inspired in all of us. So, ikaw, Pads, where do you
Correct.
draw inspiration from?
Hindi kasi I don't have the I don't kumbaga ito I'm not saying na alam ko yung pag-iisip ni Lenny, pero I've seen her career, 'di ba?
Yeah.
This woman is all about service. This, 'di ba? Even before joining politics, she was already in the service kumbaga ministry, as a lawyer for the urban poor, etc. That's who she is, eh. And parang, 'di ba, whether there's politics or not, whether she's president or not, she will continue serving.
Yeah.
And that makes her a real, genuine leader. So you can only expect her that, So patuloy lang 'yan. So sa akin din, ganun yung inspirasyon sa akin kasi ganun din naman sa yung tinuturo ng ating ng ating pananampalataya, 'di ba?
Exactly.
We don't need power to be able to serve, 'di ba? Si Jesus sabi niya, 'di ba? I've come not to be served but to serve.
Yeah.
Ang political instrument sana, but if it's not given you, 'di ba? You still try to serve. No? There are other ways to serve. So tuloy-tuloy lang yung paglilingkod. Yan ang ibig sabihin sa tingin ko ng radical na pagmamahal, 'di ba?
Yeah.
You continue loving whether you're in government or not, whether you have power or not.
Yeah.
Diba? Anyway.
That's one of the things I love most about her also is parang in my view, she's a shining example of what acceptance and commitment therapy stands for. Is about like values guided action talaga. So parang VP Lenny, baka naman gusto mo mag-guest sa show namin, okay lang, we welcome you with open arms. So,
pagbalik niya sigurado yan.
Congrats
pagbalik
pala
niya.
Jillian.
Tsaka pagbalik niya, may mas panahon na siya, di ba? Yan.
Oo nga.
Ma-interview mo na yan. Oo.
Justin, baka naman.
Oo.
Okay.
Okay, maraming salamat, Patrick.
Thank you, Pads.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for sharing us that process. By the way, kung may mga gusto palang magpatulong sa iyo to process their organizations, where can they contact you?
Sure. You guys can head over to Emmaus Center's Facebook page. So there's an inquire now button there. So you can, it doesn't have to be me, but our mental health services are available to everybody, especially in this online environment that we have. So Emmaus Center, actually, kung i-search nyo lang Emmaus Center. But the full name is Emmaus Center for Psychospiritual Formation and Accompaniment. Pero mahaba na yun. So, Emmaus Center.
Emmaus Center. Yeah, they're very busy now. Mga parishes nagpapatulong sa kanila as we speak.
EMMAUS
Yes.
Center.
Okay, maraming salamat, Patrick.
Thank you.
And more power to you and your work of healing, and integration, and ano yan? Commitment.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Maraming salamat. Yan po, si Patrick. And we pray for him, his family, and all his work. Hanggang sa susunod pong linggo, this has been the Jesuit Hour. This has been Father Nono Alfonso. Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.